Hi, everyone. Lovely to see you all. I say hi and hello instead of good morning or good afternoon because I think we have people from some 14 different countries, 13, 14 different countries. Just in this meeting, I see more people are joining as we go. So don't worry, this is just me saying hello to everyone. Uh, and I know there's also people joining this the presentation that is in some 6 hours from now. Me myself, I'm in Gothenburg, Sweden, noon, looking out over gray skies and some snow on the ground. Anyways, super grateful, of course, that you make the time for this. As announced, we'd like to present some what we think really big improvements in our brand lift algorithm. We've spent a long time really working through the algorithm really from first principle, but then also through a long process of data science-led testing of everything. The reason why we've spent so much time and needed to spend so much time and effort into doing this is, of course, that we appreciate that many of you have built up years of benchmark data using our brand lift measurements, and we don't want to force you all to throw that away and start from scratch. So what we have developed is what we think is a massive improvement of the algorithm, but that will almost not be seen at all by you until, that is, we start adding new features and all of the things that this new algorithm paves the way for. And those new product avenues, we will address them with you in the individual roadmap meetings that we've just begun booking with each of you. So there will be time to discuss this more, of course, in the future, also in the day-to-day meetings that we have on a regular basis. If you have any questions straight after this meeting, just reach out and we'll make sure to set up a meeting and talk further through the concept. I will hand you over to our Global Head of Insight, Sean Adams, who's going to walk you through what this is. It's a short presentation, so don't worry about time. But do get in touch if you have any questions. So again, very, very welcome. Thanks for being here. Sean, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Anders, and thank you everyone for finding the time to tune in today. As Anders said, this is going to be a fairly short and sweet briefing session from us, but it opens the door to conversations we'll be having with all of you individually in the Product Roadshow sessions over the next few weeks and directly in conversations. So I have a short deck, which it's going to be my pleasure to present to you. So we're on a new platform here, so I'm hoping that I can do this correctly, but here we go. So you should see something big and purple now, which is the introduction to the launch of our new algorithm, which it's interesting in a way that a new algorithm, we've been spending probably 6 months or so developing this. So it's a really exciting day for us, but it's something you'll never actually see in person. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be lifting the lid, telling you a little bit more about what's been going on underneath the surface. Some of the thinking behind it, some of the benefits that will come through to you, and also some of the logistics in terms of what happens next. So it's a big day for us, it's a step forward for our algorithm, but we also think that it's also important, it's an important conversation around brand lift. We think it adds a new dimension to the topic of brand lift, and we hope that's going to open up some new conversations across the industry as a result. But importantly, it also opens the door to a bunch of new benefits, which hopefully you will all be benefiting from over the months ahead. Here's a bit of a sneak preview of some of the things that the new algorithm will be opening the door to. First of all, enhanced branded content measurement. Now, I know a lot of you are already measuring branded content and have been for a number of years, but as a result of this algorithm update, we're going to be able to measure branded content in a better, more sophisticated manner in the future. Accessible mid-campaign reporting. Now, we've had a number of conversations over the previous months where people want to get a sense of how a campaign's performing mid-campaign, maybe with a view to be able to invest more funds in the back end of the campaign. And whilst technically we can pull numbers midway through a campaign, there are certain risks involved in terms of halfway through a campaign, the brand lift may be different to the end. So as a result of this new algorithm, we're going to be able to smooth out that process and make that more accessible. Closer links between brand lift and attention. Attention is such a big topic in the industry at the moment, and we've been really interested in what's the relationship between increased attention and increased brand lift. And with this new algorithm in place, we're going to be closer to closing that loop. So hopefully some interesting announcements on that over the next few months. Measuring the effect of multiple executions. At the moment, we can measure at a total campaign level, or there's the opportunity to look at breakdowns comparing A versus B. We're interested in being able to look at a deeper level there of combinations of creative executions and the impact that they're having. A/B testing is currently possible. We'll be able to do that in a better way. And also long-term campaign monitoring. So those campaigns that are running for 6 months, maybe 12 months, what can we do about getting a view during the campaign of how it's performing? All of those and other scenarios are possible as a result of this new algorithm. Just before I get into the new algorithm, just a brief recap on where we are now. Essentially, we've got a single story about building brand lift, but we have 2 algorithms to try and measure it. The first algorithm is for what we call push campaigns, typically display, where content is being sent out to an audience. Now, for those campaigns, frequency is the key variable that we use. So this algorithm is all about calculating brand lift effect from exposure to increasing levels of campaign frequency. So the theory behind it is that the more often you expose someone to a message, the greater chance it has of working. Also, the regression calculation that we produce from this calculates brand standings, our start point, mathematically. So no need to recruit unexposed groups as part of the process. And for this, we seek upwards of 3 frequency groups in order to be able to get a nice, smooth regression curve. But at the same time, if there's less than 3, our script cleverly also captures unexposed responses to use in the calculation. That's typically how the push algorithm has worked. When it comes to branded content or pull campaigns, where people actively make the decision to visit the content, we may be faced there with lower levels of frequency. It may only be 1. People may only be exposed to a piece of content a single time. So here what we do is we also capture unexposed responses as well as frequency to use in the brand lift calculation where needed. Now, at one extreme, that could involve calculations between a group of people who have been exposed once to the content and a group of people who haven't. At the end of the day, the brand lift outcomes will still be presented in the same manner, and they'll still be compared to relevant benchmarks. So that's typically what we have been doing. The step forward, where we're heading towards a single algorithm. So we'll be applying a single algorithm that will be used across both push and pull campaigns. It will be able to distinguish between the campaign types and apply the optimum calculation each time in order to calculate lift. The results will be presented in a consistent way compared to benchmarks as before, but also it will start to open up some of those new opportunities that I've mentioned earlier. It's a more sophisticated approach, but that sophistication also comes with greater simplicity as well. Now, at the heart of this new algorithm, there's a single thought, if you like, that's been what we've been working around. And that single thought, that unifying theme, is the idea of exposure to a campaign message. Now, typically, when we've talked about exposure, what we've normally mentioned is frequency of exposure, the number of times someone has been exposed to a message and how that has impacted on the brand lift coming out as a result. At the same time, over the last couple of years, our script has also been collecting time in view data. So for how long has someone been exposed to a piece of creative? And that information up until now, we haven't integrated into our brand lift calculations, but that's about to change. So when we talk about exposure now, we're going to be talking about 2 things. We're going to be talking about the number of times someone has seen a message, and we're also going to be talking about the length of time that they've been exposed to it. So how does that affect our calculations? Well, the key to this is about variance. So what we will be doing is we'll be looking at respondents. So everyone who responds to one of a measurement, one of your campaigns, they will be ranked using both frequency and time, from highest exposure to lowest exposure. So instead of just trying to put them into different frequency buckets, if you like, who's been seen it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and so on, we'll be using a combination of frequency and time to rank people from highest to lowest exposure. Once we've done that, the next step is that those respondents from highest to lowest will be broken out into groupings, variance groupings. So we will look to establish 6 groupings across the campaign, from the highest exposure through to the lowest exposure. And those groupings, those variance groupings, we'll be using in the familiar brand lift calculation. I'm sure many of you have seen this calculation before, where up the side our dependent variable is the relationship to the brand. Our independent variable typically has been frequency of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And what we've been calculating is the impact of increased frequency on the relationship to the brand. The same thinking applies, but instead of just frequency, we now have a combination of frequency and time in order to be able to make that calculation. Now, this approach has a number of benefits. The measuring push campaigns, it adds time to frequency, so it gives us a more sophisticated approach to understanding exposure. It removes some of the challenges of measuring campaigns with low levels of frequency variance. So sometimes if a campaign has been capped at 1 or 2, it can be hard for us to be able to get enough frequency groupings to calculate accurately. It also removes the need to capture an unexposed sample to use in those scenarios. And it will also help us to have the opportunity to deliver a more accurate mid-campaign report, which I think a number of people have said would be really useful information to be able to have. When it comes to pull campaigns, here it removes the need for frequency, where campaigns may only be viewed once. And it's utilizing time as a better way of measuring the true extent of campaign exposure. So if you have a bunch of people who've all seen a piece of branded content once, we'll be able to differentiate between those people who've seen it for a very short period of time and those who've seen it for much longer. It removes the need to capture unexposed respondents, and as a result of that, it removes any risk of natural sample differences between those who've been exposed, who've made the choice to visit that particular piece of branded content, and those who've unexposed, who haven't made that choice. So an area that we've spent a lot of time thinking about is benchmarks, because anything you change can have an impact on benchmarks. And we've spent a lot of time going through all of that to ensure a really smooth transition to the new algorithmic approach. So in terms of what we've done, we've looked at a lot of old campaigns and we've tested them using both the old algorithm and the new algorithm. And what we've seen for these campaigns is absolutely minimal differences between the benchmarks observed. So the new algorithm will be put in place for new campaigns, and there's no calibration necessary between old and new benchmarks. When it comes to branded content, again, we've tested lots of old campaigns, and here we've seen some larger differences between those for display. And typically, every campaign's different, but typically what we've seen is that we've seen higher brand standings coming through and lower brand lift as a result. And we think that, and I'll show you some examples in just a moment, but we think those changes are broadly explained by the shift in the methodology. So if we're now just testing people who have been exposed to the campaign rather than comparing to those who haven't, it's in a way a truer reflection of the impact of that piece of branded content. Now, we recognise there might need to be a need to manage narrative around benchmark changes, particularly compared to campaigns that may have run in a year, 2 years ago. So we're very, very conscious of that. So part of what we've been doing is thinking about that change, producing documentation to help explain the advantages of the new approach. Also being available to help with narratives around any particular advertiser questions. There's also the ability to retain comparisons to the old way in the short term for any publishers who are particularly keen to do that. So we can have a separate conversation around that. And the other thing is that we've also been working on calibrations for non-custom publishers. So there are some publishers who we work with who, for a variety of reasons, don't currently have the script on page and aren't able to therefore measure time. So what we've been looking at there is a way of calibrating their measurements with new measurements so that everything is comparable. Now, this slide here just shows you when we're looking at pull campaigns, branded content campaigns, it looks at some comparisons that we came as part of our process. So what you can see here, you can see the old algorithm and the new algorithm for the 4 metrics. And here you've got the first bar is the brand standings, and the darker bar at the end is the brand lift. So a couple of observations here. The first thing is you'll see that for all 4 metrics, the brand standing score is higher for the new algorithm than it was for the old algorithm. When it comes to brand lift, there's still substantial brand lift for all 4 metrics, but for the new algorithm, the brand lift is lower for 3 of the 4 metrics, but interestingly higher for action intent. But I think then when you look at the combined effect, when you look at the brand standings and the brand lift, so if you like the end point of the campaign, for all 4 metrics, measuring via the new algorithm actually leaves the brand in a stronger position than with the old algorithm. So in terms of next steps, making the transition, what we're going to be doing is we'll be introducing the new algorithm onto the platform from next Monday, from February the 7th. So all new campaigns that are booked after that date will apply that algorithm when calculating lift at the end of the campaign. From all of your point of view, there's no actual change required. You don't need to do anything differently. Booking measurements in your portal will be exactly the same as before. So on the surface, absolutely no change whatsoever. In terms of benchmarks, from that date, we'll be reconfiguring benchmarks and including them in the portal. And also, as mentioned, there's a short-term opportunity to row back to the old benchmarks if needed. So we can have separate conversations where that's required. And also we'll be having separate conversations for any exceptions. So any publishers unable to adopt this approach at the moment will be calibrating data in line with the new approach to make them comparable. So those not using the brand metrics site script, not currently measuring time, will be able to calibrate your measurements so they'll be in line with all the other measurements across the platform. From a timing point of view, a couple of steps. So today it's all about beginning of February. It's all about communicating these changes to our customers. So thank you all for attending today to this briefing session. We're doing another session with our American customers later in the day. And also working out a plan for any non-standard setups. So that's another of our priorities over the next few days. As we get into mid-February, the algorithm will be activated, the benchmarks will be updated, the ability to choose old benchmarks made available, and documentation and training will start to be rolled out during our conversations with you all. And as we get later into February, our plan there is to talk about the scenarios that I mentioned earlier on, some of the benefits of the new approach during our roadshows to get a sense of which are most important to you. And as a result of that, we'll be working out our product priorities for the year ahead. What are we going to be looking to launch first? So that's essentially what we're looking to try and do, just as a sort of a parting kind of mission, if you like. We've got quite we see this as a really important step forward for brand metrics, but also for conversations around brand lift. So, our kind of aim is to really raise the conversation here when talking about brand lift and adopt a more sophisticated discussion around what campaign exposure actually means, how it should be measured, and why that's important to understanding how a brand works. So thank you very much for listening. I will stop sharing now, and I think hopefully I'll go back on stage with the rest of you. So I think, I think I'm back on stage. So that's me. I think Anders was going to rejoin me. Yes, sure enough, the technology works. Good.
Well, we're years into this pandemic now, so technology tends to work almost every time. Just want to say thank you, Sean, for summarizing it. You always make these complex things sound really clear. But also, most of all, thank you for all of your time this time around. And please give us some more time when we ask you to join us in a discussion around product roadmap going forward with each of you individually, and do spend some time thinking about what your priorities would be for us, what your pain points are, what your strategies are, how you see brand lift being part of your business. And we'll get back to you and try and find time for that. And any other questions, do reach out. Many thanks. It's always great to see you. Bye.
Yep. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.